Very good morning and welcome once again to Lancashire Innovation Festival. We've got a week left now and we've had some fantastic speakers and still a number more to come. Lancashire Innovation Festival is an opportunity to showcase all the fantastic support that is available for SMEs in our region when it comes to innovation. You can engage with the conversation today using the chat function. Please, if you're watching, let us know who you are, where you're from, and how you would like to engage with the speakers. If you've got any questions you'd like to fire to the panel, can I ask that you please use the box marked Q&A, and questions will be answered towards the end of the session. If you'd like to continue with the conversation offline as well, please feel free to follow the hashtag LANIF2020. There's plenty of chat going on Twitter and on LinkedIn and showcasing some of the other great sessions that are still to come. You'll find a full list of everything at lancashireinnovationfestival.co.uk. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass over now to our chair for today, Claire Whelan, who will be giving us an introduction with a panel on innovation in manufacturing across Lancashire. Over to you, Claire, and panel.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everyone. And as Dan said, welcome to this morning's session on innovation in manufacturing. I'm just going to share some slides with you to explain how the session's going to go. So it won't be a moment. Okay. So the format for this morning's session is going to be a panel discussion with our wonderful set of panel that I have this morning, who I will introduce shortly, followed by a Q&A session. And as Dan has quite rightly said, please don't forget to join in the conversation, both on the Q&A box that you see down below and also on social media. So just to give everyone a bit of background around this topic, the LEP have set up an innovation board around this topic because we feel that it is so important. There's been a significant body of work done around the importance of innovation in terms of combating the productivity challenge that we face both as a county and as a country, and competing on a global scale. So I feel like this is very important. I'm going to give my take on it shortly and then move on to what our panel have to say. So let's introduce the panel today. You've got myself, who runs the Ansuka group. We have Iain Minton from Safran, Paul Armstrong from VEKA. We have Matt Pemrick from Paradigm and Judson Smythe from MGS Plastics. So I sit in a relatively unique position, I feel, in regard to this topic, because the group of companies that I run have both a company which provides innovative solutions. We provide robotics, work holding, automation, 3D printing, and we also have some manufacturing companies within the group. So from my point of view, I'm both a user of innovation and a provider of it, and that's why, you know, I'm really, really excited to be involved in this conversation, because I think it means different things to different people. So I'm just going to showcase what our take on innovation is when it comes to our company, Dem Automation and Work Holding. I'm just going to stop the share, and Dan, if you could please play the video that I've provided. Okay, thanks, Dan. I'm just going to reshare the presentation. So again, this is our take on automation, but we set up Dem because we felt that people needed an ability to innovate their processes, and our own demand came primarily from needing to increase our volume. So as you can see there, this is a solution that's been provided to one of the companies in the group, and it's a robotics solution with an automated cell attached, and Dem quite helpfully are able to simulate the real-time effect to prove that the cycle times and the efficiencies that they're going to provide will be able to do what it says basically on the tin. And I think we'll move on to that in terms of that discussion, because sometimes I think proving innovation is part of the problem sometimes. The other thing that we also provide is bespoke work holding solutions. So again, a topic that I'd like to discuss this morning with the panel around the bespoke nature of some of the innovation that we can either provide or look at ourselves, and whether there's an ability to want to bespoke solutions, or whether people shy away from that. So I've shared that presentation only really as a prompt for today's panel, because I think innovation means different things to different people. It can be a small solution, it can be a whole robotics line. I guess that's where I'm going to kick off this morning's questions. It's such a broad topic. Paul, what does innovation mean to yourself at VEKA? Does what I've shown mean anything, or have you got a completely different take on it?
It's a very good question, and I'd start by saying, when asked to participate in today's discussion on the topic of innovation, I think people start, when they talk about innovation, or there's a danger people start and traditionally think of all the very, very sexy stuff, if I can use that word. You know, you'd want to walk into an organization and be wowed by what you see. And for me, yes, that can be innovation, and sure is innovation. But from a VEKA perspective, we like to think of it as the very, very small things, right the way through to the very, very big and sexy stuff. And, you know, we look at it in terms of our people, in terms of our process, our materials, our products, our customer service offering. And it's about making those improvements and capturing those right throughout the business, from every employee in the business has a part to play in delivering that, what we would call innovation. So yeah, very, very wide ranging topic, not necessarily all about the big fancy stuff. It's throughout the whole organisation for us here at VEKA.
And is it recognised as innovation? I think sometimes people have got a tendency to not really think what they're doing is innovative, but actually those small things and those changes can really make a difference. Do you think that that's recognised at VEKA and in companies in general?
I would say not all of the time. So from our side, I think there's a tendency sometimes to take it for granted that people come to work, they want to do the best, they want to improve things, and we can take for granted those improvements that people make. I think the other thing, we all have a tendency to look at what we've not done and not what we have done. And I think it's important to celebrate those successes, to generate some momentum by celebrating those successes, because I really think what we're talking about here is almost a culture. And that's something that has to build and build and build. And, you know, you only do that by celebrating what you've done and not looking at what you've not done.
Yeah, okay, great. Iain, obviously from a Safran point of view, people would look at Safran and think that the core of what you do is innovation. What's your take on innovation?
I'd echo very much what Paul was saying. It is everything from small improvements all the way up to big R&D programs that design the next aircraft or the next engine. And again, echoing Paul, it's very much what we do. We're in a manufacturing industry, and it's human nature to try and make things easier for yourself, which in effect is innovation, and we never recognize that. So actually trying to improve innovation in Safran was initially quite difficult because everybody thought it was different to what they were doing naturally. And that led to some sessions about stimulating it through vouchers or whatever to try and identify it and make people realize. So myself improving my workspace, changing this tooling, putting a brush on the way into the shop floor to remove FOD off the shoes. Those are all innovation, but people were saying, well, that's just what I do to make life easier. And how do we stimulate that? And then all the way through to having, a new product line, new process introduction using government funding such as NATEP, or major programs in terms of designing. All of that is really key to innovation for Safran.
So given that we're saying that we don't potentially do enough of it, and you've identified, that brush and removing the FOD, how did that happen at Safran? Is that down to a culture? Is it down to the management? We're talking here about how do we identify and therefore boost the innovative solutions that are happening.
I think for us, it was a conscious effort. It was, as Paul said, down to everyone. So undoubtedly there was a management involvement to try and stimulate it. We put in place a voucher scheme where essentially ideas were put forward by people, by their team, by themselves individually, that were then scored by the people themselves to say, well, it should save this much money, it should reduce carbon emissions, it should be applicable not just in my area, in other areas. It's a great idea I've had for that area over there, not mine. And out of that, you got points, and then rated from points was a financial or a voucher remuneration, depending on what year we looked at. And that was a way of stimulating individuals to say, actually, I see that guy over there getting a load of vouchers. I fancy some of that myself. And I've did something very similar. So can I put mine in? And once you get that drive of people seeing there's a recognition, but also it's not just a recognition in terms of taking home some vouchers. It's also that my day-to-day life's easier now because I don't have to keep lifting that up off the floor because that trolley's there and that does it for me. So that makes me back easier and things like that. So people started to recognize it wasn't just about the money they're receiving, but also about the fact that we're making their lives easier. Yeah. Which inherently for the company then makes you more competitive because you're more efficient. You've got a more stable workforce. People are happy, so that it all builds on itself to grow.
Thanks, Iain. So that sounds really great and very very engaging with the staff as well. Matt, are you in a place where you're able to think like that? Is innovation a priority to your business?
I think it is, Claire, and I can only echo again without sounding like we're patting each other on the back what Paul and Iain have said. In fact, I think they were reading my script because I've got exactly the same things down. But when you ask to come on something like this as well, you do actually think, what is innovation? Because it's something that gets bandied around, and people think if they say it, it means that we're actually innovating and we're moving in a certain direction, and that's not the case, as the guys have said. So, the basic definition of innovation for me was it's an idea that is translating an idea into something that creates value. And any of them things that the two guys on before have alluded to do that. It's not necessarily about the products, it's all the equipment that we use, although it is important because, from an innovation point of view, embracing robotics and automation, different techniques and using different materials are all part of it. But it is about the culture, as Paul alluded to. And while strategy is important, it's those small, unseen, impromptu decisions that people make that can drive a business forward. And how you create that culture of innovation is by doing some of the things that Iain's just mentioned there. It's trying to tell people that no idea is too daft. Anything that little things that you do will actually improve, and by default will make you challenge the status quo and do something similar. And I think from the original strapline there, it was sort of I think when you start thinking about it, and I looked through a number of articles, and the best, which kind of suits me down to the ground, but one of the quotes on defining innovation was it's a disobedience with a happy ending. And I thought it was fantastic that, there's certain rules you can't change, like health and safety. You've got to be very, very dogmatic and from a quality perspective. But just that's what I like to encourage with the guys is, just, challenge the status quo, and that's how you get true innovation, I think, in a facility.
Thanks, Matt. So, Judson, everyone's been quite proactive around and positive around innovation so far. Do you believe there are any barriers either in your own organisation or in Lancashire to innovation as we see it?
I think barriers usually come in the form of funding when you are looking at the bigger picture and the more sort of popular definition of innovation, like big new product lines or new machinery, or as you showed earlier, the little video in your PowerPoint of the milling machine and what I assume is like a CNC lathe or something with a robot between them. Traditionally a long time ago, that would have been two men standing next to one another, passing a widget between themselves and working them on each machine. And I imagine that the way innovation goes is that somebody once decided to put a conveyor between the two of them, and then somebody invested in a CNC on one side and then couldn't keep up on the other side. And those little nuanced differences are the things that generally build up to become a major innovation. It doesn't happen overnight. If you look at a steam train to the modern electric trains and you put them next to one another, so much goes into the development of that when you compare them, they look like night and day. So I think understanding that those things come slowly and that innovation happens one step at a time, as well as putting in the funding to ensure that you can innovate. And I like what Matthew said about the sort of flexibility in the rules, going, guys, if you see something here that you're not agreeing with, challenge the system, because that's the only way we'll put the next man on the moon, or by saying no, we can do that and going at it.
Yeah, so if I look at our own challenge with innovation, quite a lot of that has been both cultural but also demand led. So in order to keep up with a customer requirement or a design for manufacture requirement that we've had to reach, and the funding has been challenging to that, because you may be, as you said, Judson, replacing traditional labour with a different way of doing things. And what I wanted to ask the panel is, do people believe in those? You're taking a leap, as you said. You believe in that a different way is going to be better. Is there a problem, do you think, in the perception of adopting new challenges and new techniques, that it might not work? Or do you think that there's a problem with the perception of innovation? Iain, if I can ask you that question.
I think there is an issue, but actually good innovation comes from learning failures. It comes from trying something, realizing it didn't work, working out why it didn't work, and saying, if I changed it that way, actually it works. So the perception is the barrier to starting it off. But once you get into that and say, actually, as Matt said, no idea is a bad idea. It just might not be quite work in this scenario or with these circumstances. It is about doing that. And the other thing, just picking up on what Judson said, a lot of our background in engineering is in our heads. It's what people know. And a lot of the time we find people know that's the way to do it, but they can't remember why that was the way to do it. It's just that's the way you do it. And you have to go and challenge all that and get down to, so what are the rules? What are the regulations that apply? And undoubtedly there are things in our industries that come up and say, you cannot do that. There are regulations that say that is unsafe or that is not high quality. But there are other things which are just, we've always done it like that. Why? Because back when we started doing it, we found that was the right way. But now we're in a much different world. There's a totally different way of doing it. We've just got to unpick that and challenge that. And that's the other barrier in terms of, I think it might go wrong because we always did it like that. And we must have done it like that for a reason.
So just picking up on that, obviously from a manufacturing point of view, we've had ways of making parts, and therefore, adding a robot might be a small jump, or adding a brush. What about kind of the adoption of digital innovation and things? Do you think that we're going far enough in manufacturing, in innovating? Because innovation can be from the small things to a robot to, making your machines talk to each other. Matt, what do you think about that?
I think Yeah, I think on that, Claire, from our perspective, I don't think we're late to the party embracing digital stuff, because our traditional model's been like a handmade, made in Burnley kind of product. But as we move into different fields and different sectors, we've got to change. I think in terms of what you said there, yeah, definitely looking at all the digitisation, as you talked about earlier on the robotics, from our perspective, we've got to embrace it. And I think everybody has as well, because we're coming out of this period now with after COVID and pandemic, and God willing we'll get out of it, or we will get out of it. But unfortunately, it's a buyer's market now. In terms of the scarcity of what we provide's gone. So the buyers, if you carry on doing things the way you're doing them, you're going to get left behind, and you've got to be. We're already planning now on what we need to do differently to offer. It's going to come to it. Let's be honest, that we're going to have to be saving the customers money going forward, and the only way we're going to do that is by embracing the likes of what we do with digital techniques, automation, robotics. And the only way we're going to do that and get people to think about that, because in our industry, Claire, everything's in terms of that kind of innovation, it's all turnkey and it is bespoke, going back to what I said originally. And the only way we're going to get that is by what we've been talking about before, is like investing in that innovation culture, where people aren't scared of failure. Like Iain said, I've made so many mistakes over my working career, but I've learned from every one of them and never made the same mistake twice. And it's that, it's like, if at first you don't succeed, try again, and at some point you will get it. It's that's from that perspective. Yeah, you've got to embrace all these new things that are coming through, because it's what the customers want.
So I'd agree with you, Matt. I think from a digital point of view, we can sometimes be a little bit behind in that respect. What would help you and your company to kick that off? If we're going to be bold on this webinar and say we're going to go for it, what would really help you to adopt digital or adopt these new things? Is it all about money, or is it people and skill set?
It is to some extent, Claire, but it's also about awareness. If we're being honest, I'm reasonably tech savvy, but it weren't even on my strategy prior to March this year. So funding is important. I think time as a resource to actually give people that ability to go out there and explore these options is another thing. But also it's an awareness. So going on being on a panel like this is great. I think we're both on the session from the LEP yesterday, which touched on the digital elements, and for me, it's an eye opener. I'm not too scared to admit that neither. It's the stuff that I've not even considered. That even if you just take 5-6% of that and apply it to what you want to do going forward, and just sow them seeds with your employees, then I think they'll do the rest for you in some respects, because they've got loads of functional experts, and I'm just like somebody who tries to be. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, and it's getting them to basically tell you what we need to be doing as an organisation.
So I think that's really interesting that you've been almost forced to look at this as part of your strategy. And I think before this session started, Judson, I think you touched on the fact that your company's been, you've looked at ways of diversifying and adopting different things as a result of COVID. Do you want to just explain a bit about that for us?
Absolutely, Claire. I joined the business 4 years ago, and we set about reshaping what MGS Technical Plastics is and what we can offer our business partners. So we have, over the last 4 years, really set about to change how we do things. We've implemented strategies to sort of restructure our foundations. I think about 50% of our machinery is 4 years or under in age. So we've completely changed out the old machinery to advance our technology that's available to us and what we can do. That's been able to, or that's put us on the front foot in being able to secure contracts with customers that we probably otherwise wouldn't have had the machinery or the capability to secure. So that's been really fundamental in how we're changing. And then from there, we sort of set that as our foundation for growth, sort of making a solid foundation to launch from. And what we do with that then is improving our digital. So I can jump on my phone now and see what any one of my machines are doing, the efficiency at which they're running, the electricity usage, etc. We are measuring carbon footprint to try and sort of hopefully in the future look at ways to offset that. So yeah, really just looking at the whole picture and seeing what we can do to innovate and improve is the baseline for what we're doing.
You've seen an actual tangible benefit from the innovations that you've adopted, no doubt.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've had instances where we've introduced a new product, it's come into our factory, it's not gone quite to plan. These are the things that happen, let's be honest. We've had our customer come in and go, yeah, you guys are doing absolutely everything right. There's no problem here. And we put our heads together then and worked to a solution. I think if we hadn't put that baseline in and those proper sort of structures and foundations, they'd come in and they go, no, guys, not doing things right. So very much go back to basics, set your house in order, and then build from there is our attitude at MGS.
Yeah, that's very, very forward thinking and aggressive in terms of that innovation. That's great to see. Paul, from a VEKA point of view, I think that VEKA's made some changes through COVID. From speaking to people there, you've had to change some of your products, I believe?
Yes, we did a number of things. So we're a plastic extrusion company in the window industry, but we shut down like most of the UK industry did at the end of March. And then we got a request from a customer that we just started to supply raw materials to, who were involved in the Nightingale hospitals, providing all the trunking for the wards, with the electrical points and the air, etc. So we actually started to provide into that industry and supported those guys, and that's led to other things. So I guess almost by accident now, at that time, we've now started to say, okay, well, we've got this plant here. It's a plant that's part of our process. We have some surplus capacity, and actually, rather than sell finished window product, we could market this compound sales to the outside world, if you like. And since then, we brought on 2 new customers, and that will be almost, well, we're just over £1 million worth of revenue for us here at VEKA on an annual basis, and really came by a set of circumstances that were unique to us all. So yeah, a big win for us.
And was that difficult to do? Because one of the things that struck me, and probably everyone on this call, was that most of our companies overnight changed to being run virtually with very little issue, really. Our IT teams did sterling jobs, and we can all do things like this. Was it hard to pivot, if you like, and to force that through VEKA?
It was not as difficult as it could have been, and part of the reason for that, and this is really interesting because you talk about digitization, automation, and Industry 4 is the kind of buzzword on everybody's lips at the moment, isn't it? And I was at one of our group sessions late last year, and we were talking about Industry 4, and one of my colleagues from one of the other sites in Europe made a presentation about Industry 4, which was really interesting because we've done a lot of work in terms of digitization, data capture. Like Judson, I can access from mobile devices all the equipment. I can drill back in time, looking at quality, performance, etc., etc. And maybe a misconception that that's almost Industry 4. I think that's a foundation that's needed to move towards Industry 4 to get, for me, that true closed loop kind of system where the machines are almost monitoring and running themselves. And I think for me, we've got some good foundation blocks in place to make the transition that we made earlier this year in terms of that new supply line for us was relatively easy internally. I guess working with the customer was where we had the issues to fine tune the compound recipes for them. But we worked through that, we got the results, and as I say, it's worked well for us going forwards. So yes, we've got some good foundations in place. I think we can improve how we made that happen going forwards in terms of the speed, which is very important today, the speed of making things happen. And that's what we continue to work on.
Cool. And you know, you mentioned that you used the capital equipment that was already there. Personally, I think sometimes some of the challenge while we're all busy doing what we're doing is creating that time and creating the funding, if you like, to be able to know what to put your attention to sometimes, because I think we've all acknowledged on this webinar that innovation can mean a really wide variety of things. So is it in your strategy? Is it within your culture? It can go either way. Iain, coming back to yourself for a moment, do you think that we collaborate enough with companies to offer innovation? I mean, there's organisations such as Made Smarter and Be the Business that provide services to help you do this. Do you think that we as a county do that well?
I think there's good collaboration that happens, but I'm not sure it happens easily. We've got the right things in our county. We've got through the Made Smarter, we've got the AMRC opening up at Samlesbury, we've got the UCLan, we've got Manchester and Liverpool on the doorstep in terms of university support, we've got Sheffield as well. So we've got a lot of those aspects, and we've got a lot of companies. Where we tend to struggle then is trying to join up, and also trying to share between us. We get very quickly into I don't really want to share my innovation with you because I'm fearful you might see that as a real step forward, and then we're competing later on. And I find that stops us collaborating quite quickly. And for us, certainly the area that I run is very much research oriented, and whether we are going to be on the next aircraft or not, that's really a key point. What we need to work upon and find easier to collaborate is very early on in the process, where you're working down at the building blocks, where you're saying, actually, what I'm working on is the process. That process could be in any products. So actually, it works well joining together at those times, because what we're developing is something generic. How I then adapt it to my product that makes it lighter, cheaper, faster to make, that's my bit. That's where I don't really want to collaborate, because that's where I'm owning my own space and that's my competitive edge. But I've got to get the collaboration up front. So it is really trying to bring companies together to do that. I guess the other area we could do with growing in is the knowledge of what's outside our sector. So each of us know quite well companies in our sector, and we know what they do. And one of the things that COVID has brought out is actually your sector is full of usually global people, and it's quite hard to get things in at the moment. It's quite hard perhaps with Brexit to bring in. So what else is there in the region that might be a machining knowledge, but it's nothing to do with the sector I'm in? The different materials, there are different products, but actually we're still machining. How can we learn from each other where we're not competing, but we're joining? And I think that knowledge of who are the actors is sometimes not necessarily there, that enables that collaboration to occur. Yeah,
I was going to ask that question to Matt, actually, as someone running Paradigm. Do you know who to go to, who to talk to? Do you talk to any of these people that Iain's just mentioned?
Probably not as much as what we should do. Yeah, and again, for the reasons Iain said there, there's certain bits of in the past, say pre-COVID, where you were very protective of bits of things that could be perceived as your own IP and your own unique way of doing things. And as I was saying before, we're not our bag is, we're trying sometimes add on to what we do, instead of reaching out to other people within the Northwest and within Lancashire that have probably got it's their core competence, and we're like kind of playing at it. So, and I think there is in terms of the collaboration on I know we've talked about it before, is that we should be doing more of it. And again, what Iain was saying there's bits of it that you can take it to a point and involve people to a point, and then perhaps that move in. There's certain bits of it that you need as your own unique selling point that you might need to retain. But yeah, we've not. I think there's a lot more we could do. We've embraced it. We have with some people. We need to do a lot more of it. and you know, we need to pull on other people's expertise where you know, like I said, we've not got it. But it's how we do it. There's certain, you know, so like the MRC for example, and the Welding Institute for us, we have got relationships with them. Pay the fee every year, but do we actually, you know, tell them or get them on board more than you know, in the extent that we should be doing, and we probably don't. And again, it comes back to what we're saying there, and going back to the original question, is that the funding is important because that can put the blocks on pursuing an automation or a robotic solution. But it's not actually having the time to do it as well, which I think now you've got to make time, and you've got to be, like I said, you make time to collaborate with people outside of your organisation, but also within your organisation as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And actually, we've got a question in the chat box from Ashley St. John Clare, who does ask how a panelist creating the time for changes to be implemented. You know, we've all recovering from the effects of COVID. A lot of us are down on our numbers. We might still have staff on furlough. It's got to be bought into by the entire company, really, for that to happen. So how is, Judson, how are you creating the time? You've already set that as your strategy, but are you doing anything extra on that? Does it just come about as normal business?
So I think it's a valid question, because I think a lot of people go, how do you make the time? You know, I'm so busy. But if you don't make the time, you'll become a busy fool. You know, there's plenty of scenarios like the blockbusters, etc. The Swedish guys who are making mechanical calculators and using the cheap Chinese digital ones to check the answers, you know, that go under overnight. The reason is because they didn't make the time to look up, pause for a second and go, what else is happening out there? What's the industry doing? Like Iain said, you know, talking to people within the sectors that are parallel to us, and seeing what they're doing. So for me, making the time is a part of my core, you know, sort of a duty at MGS for looking outside of that. I have a meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock with the AMRC, where we're going to be discussing an automation project, and bouncing a few ideas around, you know, how do we move this forward from being quite a manual operation. And Claire, you know, having this conversation now, obviously that's something that we might end up discussing, having seen what you guys offer in your own businesses. So for me, really speaking, you have to make the time. If you don't, you're selling yourself short and doing your business a disservice, because you will be stuck behind very soon after that.
So, Judson, I can obviously see from that discussion that we should probably talk, but there is a question in the box around, do you believe there's any merit in collaborating with public and private? Has anyone on this panel done that, or have you done that, Judson?
I haven't. I find that public sector and private sector move at different speeds. I'd love to be proven wrong. I see a few smiles on the faces on the panel there. The speed at which we have to work at MGS is incredible. You know, there's never a straightforward project. There's always this lead time or something that comes into the mix, and as a result, we have to act really quickly. We spoke earlier about pivoting and introducing new products as a result of COVID-19. There's a lot in the private sector who've done that and done it successfully, and there's a lot in the newspapers about the public the sector that haven't really done that so successfully. So I'd love to be able to do that. It just seems to not work that well, in my opinion.
Yeah, from my own point of view, I wouldn't really know where to start, to be completely honest, to actually engage in a public relationship. I think the private sector and the relationships we've got in Lancashire are good. And hopefully with things like this, we can all pick up the phone to each other and have those discussions and engage with the AMRC and Made Smarter, etc. But I think I mimic your point there from my own point of view, Judson. We've also got another question in the question Q&A box. So Stephen asks, I'd like to get the panel's view on the R&D scheme, which is designed to encourage and reward innovation, albeit retrospectively. How do they view it, and what more, if anything, do they think could be done to advertise this funding, which is clearly underutilised? Paul, do you think it is underutilised? It's something that you're aware of?
I don't believe it is something I'm aware of. If I go back in history, you know, we talk about R&D tax credits. That's about as far as my knowledge would go in terms of funding available to businesses. I'm looking at Iain here. Having worked with Iain in the past, that's probably more Iain's arena.
Okay.
Iain, I don't know if you have any view on that.
So certainly R&D tax credits we've done for a while, and if that is what Stephen's referring to, because I take it that from the retrospectively, it is something that's open to everyone, but it is something that does usually require external support to help you identify what is the innovation. And a lot of the time it's more difficult to say, well, how did you capture the costs that enable you to drill down and say, I spent that and get the money back? And that usually is the hard point. Actually, the rules of what's eligible are quite large. It's having the ability to prove that that spend is in the eligible bit and not in the ineligible bit that becomes the difficult part.
Yeah, I think
there's many other there's many other funding available, all sorts of tiers, all sorts of sectors, and it is worth looking out and talking to local entities. So in aerospace, we talk to the NWAA. We will go and talk to ATI, AMRC. A lot of these areas know what funding's available and can point you in the right direction. Judson, you're talking to AMRC. I'm sure they could say what schemes are available that allow you to get some money back, some support in that manner.
Yeah, just to mimic your point, Iain, I think we came about that via our accountants, actually, not an industry forum. And we've used that for many years internally, and actually quite surprised at how wide the rules are, but I completely agree. You're kind of working in reverse. So it seems not counterintuitive, but a bit more difficult to think about the future, really, because you're doing it kind of in reverse, aren't you, in that respect? So, okay, Matt, what's your take on that? Do you use R&D? Is that recognised?
Yeah, same as Iain and yourself, really, Claire. We do it. And again, I happened across it because it was a nice number on the P&L, which and the accountants said, you need a specialised set of accountants to do it. And I was actually questioning the cost of the accountants we were using, why we couldn't do it internally. But that was the extent of my knowledge until you get your drive into it. I think what it does do is it does make you can. There is some kind of recourse for getting it back in it, and it on a couple of projects. And again, you've got to read the rules and know what you can apply for and what you can't. And particularly in the power generation more than the aviation side, it has allowed us to go off down a couple of different routes. And being honest, that's where we've got the majority of our benefit from this year. But again, that was some kind of joint collaboration with outside of Lancashire, which is the TWI. Just listen to what Judson's had to say there. For us now to actually get involved with the AMRC and more than just talking, but actually implement, get them into the crux of what we do and what we're looking for and what they can tap into is probably going to be one of the things I add to my list, my never-ending list of things that I'm going to look at.
So good luck with that. Just a follow-on question for me really is: do you think that you use organisations within Lancashire more, or your industry organisations to help you go in the right direction? What would you say you err to?
We probably use we don't use them in Lancashire as much as, and I think for me, particularly over the last 6 months, it's been an eye-opener what we can actually access and what support's actually available. And it's probably more for us as an organisation. I've been with Paradigm 2 years now, and they never really, embrace things like this, if I'm being entirely honest. That's good in terms of getting out there, networking and finding what's available. I think with the TWI, we're perceived as being a manufacturer of complex welded fabrications, and they did what they said on the tin. So, and that support, if we're being honest, instead of going to Coventry, we're probably available in the Northwest, just under a different guise. And being proud Lancastrian. I'd rather we did that. You know, it's that we tap on the resources that we got. I think as well, one of just coming to the reason why we've probably not done it is because we've got a plethora of engineers on site. We're really good engineers, really, and this probably comes back to trying to get that innovative culture. Is that they've always done things, they've done it a certain way, and they're experts, and they've got all the qualifications, they've read all the books, and sometimes it's almost like a pride thing of going asking for help as well. And like I say, you've got to really just say, look, you might not know everything. We're not saying you're not an expert and you're brilliant and you're great at what you do, but there's a big wide world out there. And go and ask for help, but giving them also, from our perspective, and we keep coming back to time, just saying, right, go on, forget about your day-to-day job for a couple of months, go out there and start them conversations with people. So
it's interesting that, because I think it actually links into culture that we were talking about earlier. Judson said, it probably came around originally from an engineer putting another machine next to something and putting a conveyor attached to it. Actually, what you're talking about here is a leadership decision to follow innovation and give people throughout the company that time to engage with that. So I think it's maybe a change that we're seeing. Paul, from a VEKA point of view, I know you've got really strong Burnley and local values, but you are part of a group. So in terms of engaging with different organisations, how does that work? Are you free to, do you support the Lancashire kind of network of people like Made Smarter, AMRC, or do you look to a more global set of support?
Yeah, I think we do both. We certainly have a group which is present in most countries in Europe, North America, South America, China. So we get together operationally at least once a year. So my equivalent from all those sites, we get together, we share best practice, and then we'll take that away. And that happens in all the disciplines really of the group. But we also work with local organisations. So we have engaged with the AMRC. We engage with UCLAN through Burnley College. And various others. But the other thing is, the group's been around a long time. It's been in business 50 years, Burnley 35 years now, and we have a lot of experts, and that's the kind of thing that my colleagues here have been talking about. I'm fairly new to this industry. I can't keep saying that. It's 7 years now. But looking at doing things differently, I've engaged with machine suppliers, brought them in. This is what we do. Are there better ways we can do this, guys? And I guess a little bit of a challenge for me has been changing the attitude, if you like, and the approach within the group, who have got 50 years of expertise and are world leaders, but to challenge the status quo and do things a little bit differently. And we've got there. It's just taken a little bit longer and some perseverance. And we are doing some things now differently here on the site in Burnley, which have been adopted by other group companies. And that's, I guess, having that fresh outlook. It's not always somebody from within the industry that knows best. And, so we talked before, very early on in this about, sometimes you'll do that and you'll get it wrong. But I think you have to balance the investment for what you want to try, the potential gains, and sometimes give it a go. One trial is better than 1,000 ideas in some cases where no action's taken. And Iain mentioned it before. We talk about valiant failures. Let's celebrate those because we've tried something and it was for the right reasons with the right logic. Maybe it's not worked. How do we adapt it? How do we make it better? So to answer that question, we do things within the group, but we do things locally. And then we will always take that back to the group and hopefully get the best practice from that and share it.
So I guess the valiant failure is fine as long as it's not costing an amazing amount of money, isn't it? And I guess that might be something that could hold our businesses back from taking that leap. If we feel that was an issue. So the cost versus the benefit exercise, I guess, would be quite key to that. An appetite. Yeah,
it's absolutely key, and we will always do business case for these kind of things. And I guess that's another thing worth talking about. When you do a business case for something, you get the green light, hopefully, to go ahead and make the investment and do what you need to do. But sometimes not all organisations are very good at coming back and revisiting that in 6-12 months' time and say, did that deliver what we expected it to deliver? And I think that's a real key thing as well. And I've worked in organisations in the past where that can get overlooked, and suddenly you see you spent all this money, but you're not seeing the return at the end of it. So that's a real key thing for me too.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we've answered all the questions in the Q&A box from everyone. I think I'd just like to kind of finalise by going around and asking somewhat every panellist. The topic of this conversation was around how do we boost that. So if you could pick one thing that you would ask for in terms of boosting this from everything we've spoken about this morning, what would it be? If we can come back to yourself, Paul.
I think for me, one of the big challenges for me is, I guess, what is the state of the art that is possible? Because you don't know what you don't know. And so how do we get an easy way to sort of see what really is possible, you know, taking best practice from wherever that may be. So that for me, I think, is key, because we've all got lots of ideas, lots of thoughts, and we are moving on, and that's the nature of continuous improvement. But ultimately, you know, if we're shooting for the stars, what does that look like? And you know, when we talk about automation, you know, where would I go to get that real expertise in automation, and where would my engineers pick a phone up and say, could do with some help here? And it's not always easily understandable where to go.
Yeah, so connect us up and tell us what the art of the possible is.
Yes.
Great. Iain, what about yourself?
I think for me, we come back to making people aware. It links to what Paul was talking. The more that our people are aware of what they do, and the fact there are other ways of doing it, that means giving them time to go and investigate other areas. It means bringing in companies who like the example earlier about bringing in a machining company to say, you can do this differently. It's that awareness that then stimulates. And if we can create the space and the interest of people to go and do that, then that helps start things going.
Great, thank you. Judson?
For me, I think it's changing the stigma that manufacturing is something that happens in an old, you know, dark mill building. I think we need to get young people interested in manufacturing earlier. You know, I think at age 6, so many young girls, for example, know what a nurse, a doctor, a veterinarian is. Not many know what, you know, thermodynamics is, or, you know, what renewable energy is and things like that. So I think diversification in the workforce, you know, getting more girls attracted to manufacturing at a younger age, and just in general across sort of young future candidates, getting them interested earlier in manufacturing. Because when you think about it, I mean, we've got all sorts of really, really cool things for you know, young people to come and get their teeth sunken into. And the more of those people we can pull across from other sectors earlier, the better. I think, really speaking, manufacturing innovation comes from people. A lot of it ends up with sort of taking labor out, you know, because that's how we compete with the East, etc. But you need brains and skills and new ideas and fresh ideas, and that comes from the next generation and the generation after that. For me, I've been working, you know, with a few different people to try and encourage that growth at grassroots, so that we can see the manufacturing industry benefit in years to come.
I think what you've raised there is really important, and actually we could probably have a whole session on that, to be honest with you, because you're right, you have to tackle the core and the grassroots situation to be able to improve what we're talking about here today. And you know, when we kicked off this session, I said a few words around the importance of the innovation board to the LEP, because, you know, if we are going to compete and we are going to combat the productivity challenge, it is a much deeper issue than us buying a few widgets and sticking them on our machines at the end of the day. So, Judson, I think you've picked up on a, you know, really core point there. How do we make this an attractive industry? How are we able to compete on a global scale? We've got the skill, and we've got a lot of it within Lancashire as well from a UK point of view. So we should be able to do that. But yeah, you're right there. Thanks for that. And Matt, what's your take on what could really boost innovation for yourself?
Yeah, you know, again, without sounding like a broken record, I can echo what the other three chaps have said there, Claire. I think, again, just picking up on Judson's point, that bit about you know, the diversification, particularly from an industry perspective. You know, you can particularly within aviation, you've got a set of rules, and it's very, very, you know, we're quite innovative generally in terms of the technologies that we use. But if you pull somebody in from an automotive background, purely from an automotive background, for example, they'll come in with a totally different set of ideas. But sometimes, you know, what I think people have got to realise is that innovation is not invention. It doesn't all have to be you know, just because it works in automotive, it's not necessarily going to work in aviation. There'll be bits of it that do, but you know, you can't move from a very, very lean organisation, you know, particularly within aerospace and power generation, which is like a more agile model. But I think if you take bits of it, steal with pride, plagiarise what the bits that you can, and you know, kind of mould it to what you want and make it that your own perfect turnkey solution. But you know, take the best bits of what's out there and embrace it. And I think that's you know, that's a key point from, you know, what we're saying, and you know, particularly with young people as well. I found most of the daft but brilliant ideas have come from some of our younger employees, and it's just trying to convince the wily old fox in the corner that, you know, give it a go, you know. And we had one project on a particular part that we do for the aerospace industry. They had a project about 6 years ago, and the concept was brilliant, and it kind of failed because I think a couple of people wanted it to fail. But we're now going back, and we took the time during during the pandemic, where, you know, we've got a little bit of time on our hands. We you know, thought instead of furloughing a couple of the engineers, we're going to actually just revisit some of the projects that we've done in the past. And they've gone back and they've actually made an innovation from 6 years ago work, because they went in with you might find a balls out attitude that they were going to explore and knock down all these barriers that have been put into place, and it was fantastic, you know. And it's something that we can now offer different to the customer. And as I said, when we come out of this, it's a buyer's market, and so them kind of like, you know, you don't have to do anything, you know, apart from alter a couple of things on your from a DVI perspective. But you know, there you go. There's, you know, it's immediate cost reduction for you, and away you go.
And would you have done that had it not been for the circumstances you had?
No, we probably wouldn't. We probably wouldn't have had the time. And I keep going back to it. I mean, you make your own time as well. You can be busy fools, like I think somebody alluded to later. But it was just that, look, take that project. Somebody said it was a fantastic project. Well, let's go and have a relook at it. Different set of eyes, different mentality. And, you know, I mean, I've no doubt there's countless others of them within, you know, which have been stopped because it was some, you know, a younger generation person who come out and suggested it, and it's great, you know. So that's from my perspective, that's what we're doing.
Great. Well, hopefully that, you know, the situation we all found ourselves in might provide a catalyst to some of these innovations. And I think this festival's coming at a really good time, actually. So thank you very much to you all as panelists for a really good discussion, and hope you all have a good day. I'm going to hand back to Dan now.